I am never going to make another 20-minute video ever again. Hello there. So I had this thought that came up out of the blue, and I wanted to talk about introverted sensing again, because I was looking at my other two videos about this and I thought to myself, they're okay, but damn, I don't think I... Oh, okay, what the hell is this? I need to redo this. I'm panicking. They were kind of funny, but I wanted to make a small revision on this topic. I think my perfectionism is rearing its ugly head, and it usually leads to nothing, but this idea, I need to see it through. So I took some notes on this topic again, and I reflected upon my own experiences, and I consulted the book written by my dad, Carl Jung, Psychological Types, and without further ado, let's talk about how it feels to have introverted sensing. First, I wanted to preface one thing. I noticed that Jung puts sensation in the introverted attitude and the introverted sensation type in two different sections, and that is really messing with me, and I don't know how to reconcile that, so take this video with a grain of salt. So if I had to make a diagram right off the bat, it would look like this. So I remember Jung saying that in regards to introverted sensing, it has, quote, a subjective factor, for besides the sense object, there is a sensing subject who adds his subjective disposition to the objective stimulus. What does that mean? To my understanding, it differs from extroverted sensing in the sense that SC dominants would be concerned with the object directly and right in front of them, and they would figure out this object in order to make sense of it, whereas SI dominants would be more concerned with what thoughts or feelings arise from within when they look at or listen to this object. And this is what Jung calls the subjective interpretation. And this subjective interpretation could vary wildly from SI dominant to SI dominant. Jung brings up the example of having different SI dominant patients paint a picture of the same landscape. And depending on the internal state of each patient, the painting takes on a totally different tone and feeling. I'm pretty much paraphrasing here, but that's basically the gist of what is going on. To bring up a more contemporary example, here is Marcus from Detroit Become Human, and he's encouraged by, guess who? His dad, Carl, to point something, anything, on the canvas. And depending on the tone the player chooses, related to the object that the player chooses prior, Marcus will paint a completely different portrait. Unfortunately, this is the only effective visual illustration and tangible explanation of introverted sensing, because other than that, I could see why this function is so misunderstood and so difficult to understand. But why not? Let's go try to. Here, hold my hand. We're gonna explore this some more. So let's start again. Absent the outlet for artistic and creative expression, we're pretty much dealing with the monotony of everyday life, which is, like 80% of my existence? What the hell? The typical demeanor for the SI dominant is one who is calm, a bit reserved, a bit passive, sometimes gloomy, sometimes distant, and undeniably composed and really unassuming. And it's really due to the irrational nature of our function, which in this context does not mean nonsensical, but more so non-judgmental, absent the lens for which we assign certain happenstances as good or bad or whatever other adjective, at least initially. It doesn't really occur to me to look at current events, for example, or social situations to pick out what was right or wrong. I certainly don't find myself pointing my fist in the sky in protest per se. I'm not too concerned with expressing that kind of drama, at least outwardly. I just find myself by default wanting to understand what the hell happened, and I tend to be excessively thorough and detective mode about the whole situation. In my cognitive stack, I'm more concerned about the social aspect of it, what people were thinking, what paradigms they had that justified their actions, what the predominant socio-cultural norms were that influenced those actions, and so on and so forth. I imagine that ISTJs would be more concerned about the technical and mechanical order of things, but don't quote me on that. When we're talking about the scope of observation of things in general, I'd happen to start with focusing on and examining rather intensely with a few ideas or objects at a time, And it's like looking at the cell of an onion through a microscope. And then I would expand to more and more general ideas toward the end of my thought process. All the while, the progression of one point to another is as sound as I could make sense of. Otherwise, I would sort of go back and proofread like a madman until I could safely go forward to the next stepping stone, if you will. Some people call it building up, some people call it rippling outwards. I'd like to think that both are happening at the same time. The major thing that gets in the way is how, whenever I take in information in real time, especially new information, especially when it's not relevant to past experiences, because apparently at this point in my life I realize that the speed at which I ingest new information is how quickly I could relate this to what I already know. I have this issue of taking in this information like any other person, but then an explosion of past interpretations and images hijacks my brain and often skews my current understanding of what is otherwise right in front of me. And so gaining clarity and understanding is like playing a game of hot and cold, just trying to find the key points of this piece of new info. This usually happens in conversation when I guess one thing and then the other person says, well, yes, but it's more so like this. And then we sort of like narrow things down from there. In the context of SITI, we can also look at it like this. When I'm by myself and cross-examining new information with past experiences, I'm playing theoretical Tetris in my head, I'm sort of moving pieces around to find the best manifestation of feng shui. Though I think at this point in my life, I don't really have a cabinet to manage, it's more like a warehouse. And there are trucks parked outside the warehouse with information that I am tasked with sorting out based on some metric that I learned to refine and re-refine over time. I can only assume that SIFI works in a similar manner, except that it's a collection of values and principles that are being sorted out and refined. I don't know, any ISTJs out there that happen to stumble upon this video, please shed some light on this. In extreme cases where things get overwhelming, or if I'm in a real bad mood, first of all, I get tension headaches, which suck really bad. And second, externally, I'm very quiet and visibly exhausted, but internally, my imagination takes a very dark turn. Jung mentions this concept of archaicized extroverted intuition, where instead of the usual natural attraction towards possibility that NE is so known for, this version of NE is where dark and brooding thoughts lurk in the shadows, and it's not manifested as enthusiasm, but more so paranoia and vindication. And this is what goes on in the mind of an SI Dom if NE isn't recognized and utilized more frequently. This is why I hang out with NE Doms. Well, I mean, this is why you go outside and explore the world in general, but we'll talk about that another time. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I have an ENFP friend, which is cool. ENTPs are just as interesting, although I have no idea when the hell I'm going to be competent enough to make a video on those motherfuckers. I have a few more notes that I want to mention quickly because I couldn't figure out when and where to put them in my videos, so when we are talking about the recollection of memory, go to a giant superstore and then look at those 8K Ultra HD TVs and the vibrant colors and the crystal clear pictures and the angled lights. That's sort of how reliving my memories would feel like. I think this is just me in particular, but I feel mildly disturbed with logical inconsistencies and misunderstandings, but I'm perfectly content with contradictions and paradoxes. I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and let's call him Bro Mysterio, and I asked him this one question out of the blue. So, what do you think is the meaning of life? And he said, "Bro, it's like nothing and everything, bro." Oh, okay. Do you want to go out for some brownies? Hot choice. Let's go get some blondies too. Yeah, so, I think that's it. I mean, that's the end of the video. I mean, what do you want me to